Welcome to Earth Converse podcast. I'm Penelope Maver, and we explore our relationship and conversations with the earth, all in the hope of inspiring a deeper connection with ourselves, each other, and the earth that is our home. And today I'm delighted to have Thurstan Crockett here. And I met Thurstan back in 20 years ago when I was Common Purpose program director, running a leadership program there. And Thurstan was the head of sustainability and environment, head of environment and sustainable development. Was that it, Thurstan? Was that
That's close.
Close.
Head of sustainability and environmental policy. What a job title.
I loved talking to him then, and I'd love talking to him now. Recently we reconnected, and I just love the work he's doing, and he's just got a wonderful story of his connection to nature, and also I guess it's sort of like all the different components of that, and we're also right at the end, probably going to, or maybe throughout, going to talk about his work with Fathers and Sons and Band of Brothers and his beautiful offerings. He's got a retreat coming up soon. We'll hear about that. And we'll just sort of weave and dive in the conversation. Yeah. So
fantastic.
Yeah, great. And Thurstan, how would you describe yourself? What's your
I guess these days I describe myself as a coach, a retreat leader, and a sustainability consultant.
Any shaman in there?
Yeah, I do see myself as a shaman in training. Like I'm an elder in training as well. I've hit that kind of age where, I think it's time.
Yeah, claiming that. That's interesting, actually. We talked to Ray Hillis about eldership, and I think that's really interesting journey for us all about that. So, but starting off from the outer back, what is your earliest memories of your connection with nature and your developing relationship?
So I think falling into a pond through the ice, age 2, it's my first memory in my life. And this weird thing about memory, I wasn't sure I'd remembered it right, or even that it happened, until I went back aged about 18 and looked at the pond, and there it was in North London. And I thought, that happened. And maybe that shaped my love of water. Because I can't get enough. I live so close to the sea, it's around me. Out the front door is the outer harbour, out the back door is the beach. And I'm on it, in it, under it as often as possible,
Really? Have you done or you follow the Wim Hof in terms of that cold water?
I've only just it's high summer here in theory. It's August, and it's only just warm enough for me to take my wetsuit off. Actually, but I was in the other night at midnight, swimming with not a soul around.
Magic.
Fear, totally naked. On the beach, and there are thousands of people during the day. It's funny.
Oh, magic. Yeah, skinny dipping. Heard this great podcast actually about skinny dipping. There's a woman who's promoting it. She's an English woman in New Zealand called Naked Kate. But the sensations of that. But the Wim Hof, actually, he was saying he had, from what I know, I did the course, but his wife died of suicide, and he was just sort of trying to make sense of that, and he searched around, just following his nose about, through healing and all the, religions and esoteric sort of things, and he jumped in cold water in a pond intuitively, and he just went, that was the sort of the consciousness awakening that he needed, and so that sort of followed his sort of ideas through that. But it's a wonderful, so I wonder at 2 years old, it's sort of this, maybe it's sort of helped you you know, be, be the person you are in
Yeah,
that
it could.
consciousness.
Well, yeah, it could well have. And then I guess after that, we moved to West Yorkshire, and there's different kind of water there. It's just raining, snowing, drizzle all the time in the Pennines. But I did have a great park and my own woods. It felt like, and I used to take my dog running in the woods, and I had no idea how special they were, but they were beautiful woods, Heaton Woods, on the edge of Bradford, and I got to see jays and dippers in the streams, and fantastic wildlife, and I got a lot of that from my dad. He loved his nature. He grew up in Northamptonshire, where John Clare, the nature poet, is from. And he shared a lot of that with me as a kid, and so I got to love my birds and bird watching, and I still do. And also a sense of, just spending time in the country, and in wild places. Really special.
Was it with your dad, like he wanted sort of just that sort of sense of bonding, or a place where you had?
Yeah, I mean, he was quite proper and a bit uptight. A lovely man, beautiful man, but the son of Victorians, and so he was quite proper and reserved. But once he was in nature, I saw the sense of awe in his face, and he wanted to share that with me because he knew I'd get it. I think kids just do. When we're in innocence as a child, everything is wondrous, and somehow over time we lose that sense of wonder. I mean, many people, some don't, and I've looked steadily to reconnect it, to re-find it.
Wonderful. I love the word, awe and wonder and that magic of that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And so you lived in Bradford in the city, and then
I lived on the edge of the city, that kind of leafy suburb, big garden, very lucky. And my dad bought an extra bit with an old coach house. It had been probably 18th century. And, I just had dens and a lot of trees to climb. And I spent, forever in trees and making dens. He built me a tree house out of rough timber. This thing looks lethal. When I see photos of it now, I think, how did he let me up there? But it was such an adventure. And he did, he allowed me to push. He wasn't at all cautious. He'd been a naughty child, and he encouraged me to be, just to spend. And those they feel like halcyon days when you're young and you're out from first light until dusk. It's a fantastic time, and I loved it.
How old were you there in the tree house?
So I went. I'd be about, I reckon, about 7 when I see the photos. We moved when I was 3, and we stayed there until I was about 18. And it was gorgeous.
Yeah, and it's the teenage years, the wild.
Yeah, teenage years. I fell out. I went to war with my parents.
Yeah, good.
So,
good rite of passage.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and I spent. But I used to go on holiday with them to the west of Ireland, Wales first, then the west of Ireland from about 10 onwards. And my mum, who also loved the sea, loved the water, she bought, against my dad's advice, and he strongly disapproved, she bought a bungalow for $4,500 overlooking the whole of Donegal Bay. And it was the most amazing place. And that had, the wild West Atlantic coast. And I just completely fell in love with that all over again. And my other place was my Uncle Hugh and Auntie Jane. moved to North Yorkshire to a little place called Snaseham near Hawes, very 1,000 feet up, really quite remote for Britain, and barren hillside. And he became a forester and made his money from Christmas trees. But the wildlife that moved in was phenomenal. And now red squirrels are there. They moved in from Lancashire into his woodland, and red deer, pine marten. It's an incredible example of how to combine business with conservation. And I must have planted 1,000 trees up there, and spent a lot of time as a teenager just going on doing bird surveys. Walking the same route every day, recording what I saw and loving being there.
Just for your own interest?
Well, partly they became it became a nature reserve, and so recording what was there was part of that as well. And I was like a junior conservationist in my eyes,
So he inspired you for
he
the
inspired
whole conservation
me.
and sustainability?
My auntie inspired him. He'd have really, she had the conservation heart. My dad's sister, and I did the bird watching I'd do with her. He inspired me in many ways. He was really my first mentor, I think. Really, and young men, well, young women do, but young men need a mentor, someone who isn't their dad, who can show them how the world is, really. And that's what I've found in the work we do with the Band of Brothers.
Yeah. Do you want to say something about that now?
I think so. So using that kind of model of young men need a mentor, and it can be good role models as fathers do obviously exist, but an awful lot of kids who are struggling or off the rails have had no male role model. Young men, so they don't know what it is to be a good man. And a Band of Brothers set up in Brighton, and it really we work with kids who have chaotic lives. Usually they're in prison or they're heading there, or they've come out, and we work with them. We do a rites of passage, a kind of modern rites of passage weekend, and then 12 weeks of mentoring. And as a group of men, we effectively hold them and show them how to be good, non-judgmental, vulnerable, open, honest men, and they love it. They really love it. And there's a lot of it is outdoors based as well.
But this is so important, and I think in terms of the outdoors is the sacred space to hold it, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. We create both kind of indoor space that's quite magical, and liminal as well. So they've no idea what time of day it is, day or night most of the time. And then we take them out and put them through it a bit out in nature as well. And a number of the really profound events of the weekend, whether it's expression of grief or of anger, really fully and felt, they all take place in the open, often in woodland. Woodland really lends itself to this work as well.
And I mean, isn't it amazing? 12 weeks, you've got 12 weeks, but this intensive weekend, but how kind of little, and I know that, you're as experienced facilitators, but how little is needed really to light that fire and to help people really connect with themselves and their lives and feel worthy and
Well, it's and it is it's a big intervention. For many of them, it's the first really big life-changing event they've had for some time, particularly a positive one. And so it does very often have a really profound influence, and the stats back that up. Their criminality drops, their relationships improve, their sense of purpose, and their sense of meaning and connection. So, we hear from guys years later, young men ring me up, tell me how they're doing, what they're going, and they might end up with asking a favor. And I either say, yeah, I can do it, or no, I'm sorry, but those bonds are strong, So we give them I think we give them a sense of meaning, of purpose, and connection.
Absolutely. And so important for even, there are people that are, at risk or in prison, but they're just also men generally or women generally to go through these rites of passage and to honor that because in our modern life we're lacking
that's right.
that.
We've lost it. I mean, what is it for young men? Generally it's going out, getting drunk, maybe getting a driving license and crashing their first car. There isn't, they've been lost within Western society mostly. And so, but they've been going for millennia before that with a purpose. And in, some cultures, they still strongly exist, but not so much. So they're profoundly important. And that also a sense of ritual with things. We've found it really matters.
And what I mean, you're a dad of a teenage boy, so
Tell me about it.
So how has it been, holding that? You're literally right there, isn't it?
You asked me at a funny time. He's just gone off for away for a fortnight, and I feel kind of liberated. But no, I mean, I decided a while ago. I mean, two things. One is I really listened to what he wanted in life, and I'd support him to be a creative adventurer. That's my kind of my goal. And at the moment, with a particular focus on his freedom to mess up, make mistakes as well. And sometimes, I think of myself as maybe a bit too liberal and easygoing on stuff. But when I really check in with it, the balance is about right. And the kind of encouragement that we've provided and where we are means that, he gets up to stuff that's dodgy and maybe he shouldn't. But he spends a whole day in a wetsuit and he's jumping into the sea and he's messing in the surf with his mates. And I might give them a little bit, watch for the riptide, and don't be jumping off there when the tide's out and all that stuff. But he's a great kid and he's really good fun, and he's very musical, and he's a great drawer artist as well. So he's he's a classic teenage boy, Tom.
I bet.
I love him to bits.
Wonderful. I bet you do. And I love the this sort of sense of freedom from this sort of sense of safety, or as well. Both having both. And I bet he's creative like his dad. So going back in terms of linear, like you did the conservation, and I love actually the idea of the attention to track. That's a real beautiful skill of really noticing and around the birds and the animal and the life. So where did you get to? How did you get into sustainability? And
okay, so
what happened there?
I guess that stuff was very deeply held within me, and then for a while I did probably, if I look back on it now, I've always been a wordsmith. I've always loved writing and speaking, but writing particularly. And I decided I was going to be a journalist. And it was kind of the least worst profession that my dad would accept. When I look upon it now, that's kind of where it's at. and why I needed so much permission, I don't know, but I did. And so I set about that as a first career. And as I went through it, I mean, I found that I felt intensely political and environmental, and I couldn't voice that effectively in local and regional journalism, you know. And the need to be balanced didn't really suit me very well. I wanted more polemic, you know, as a kid, well, as a young man. And then I started to do specifically environmental freelance work. So on drought and water shortages, and taking too much water out of rivers, and then on acid rain and acid mist, and then on anti-nuclear work. So I got really engaged with a campaign against nuclear waste disposal in Britain, which was, you know, shallow burial and forget about it. I mean, it was so poorly thought through. And I became a campaigning journalist for a while on that. And then that was the gateway into Greenpeace, and I was a regional campaigner. And then finally, I went to work for the wildlife trusts. There's a network of each county in England, in Britain, has its own wildlife trust, local conservation bodies, and I work for their national organisation. And I realised I was reconnecting with what I loved. And then several career jumps later, I you know, having been a generalist, I worked in tourism, I worked in economic development, and I kind of ended up combining them all.
And sustainability. I'll go back in terms of what did you notice about with the Greenpeace and the Wildlife Trust, about, you know, at a sort of a policy level, and at that time, where was your own connection with nature? You know, both questions.
Yeah, it's a good question. So my what I noticed about policy was that in conservation, there were many experts who knew lots of Latin names, but they didn't seem to notice the impact of climate change. We're talking about late 80s, early 90s, which was right on my agenda. And there wasn't a connection between different aspects of environmental policy. You know, they had their silo, and we do suffer from that with organisations that are very much in their own silo. I think it's improved over time, and there's more joint working. But there was that sense of, you do that bit, and you do it to a very high level. But what about all of this? And then my connection, I suppose, I continued to make all those trips to Ireland and to and have my favourite places. There's something about that I think is really important about a deep connection with specific places, and even specific spots to just sit and watch, and be open and notice. And so I used to do that a lot, and I realized it was my restorative time. It was my way of relaxation. And I guess at that point I began to notice that things were changing in the environment. And over, 45 years, I'm just staggered with the degree of change and the speed of it.
So returning to those places and developing that deep relationship, you've got a real, and that sort of very detailed observation and noticing, you can really see those changes.
Well, it's a change, massive changes in what species I see. And so I particularly notice the bird life, because that's my biggest passion in the natural world. But actually it's a kind of whole scale and across all sorts of things.
What would be an example?
In some cases it's improvements, improvement in water quality, and particularly bathing water and inshore waters, thanks to the EU. But that's another story. The European Union, we had to clean up our act as the UK. So yeah, it's not all a bad story, but overall it's seen a massive decline in species here, and very worrying trends internationally as well.
What did you notice particularly in terms of bird life?
I mean, I suppose a handful of things. There were some birds that were really common when I was a kid: greenfinches, even redstarts, other birds that I used to see all the time, but I nearly never see now. And others like red kites and ravens that have done incredibly well. I mean, partly through reintroduction. And then some changes in things. So some birds seem to have just moved in. So, due to climate change. So egrets, which we hardly ever saw, like a white heron when I was a kid, barely, very, very rare. Yeah, now I see them in every estuary around here and throughout, certainly the southern half of Britain, probably further. They've colonized. I remember when I saw a spoonbill in Poole Harbour in Dorset, I couldn't believe my eyes. It was like I was watching David Attenborough film happening in England. But those changes have happened in a relatively short period of time, and of course, some species are driven out the other side, and it's the speed of it is not something that lots of nature can keep up with. So yeah, it's quite scary.
Has your auntie and uncle still got the nature reserve?
Yeah, he died sadly a few years ago. Auntie Jane, she's in her 90s. She still lives there, and the red squirrels climb up her walking stick. That's how well they know her. She's incredible. She's her relationship with animals is amazing. Pheasants are the same. They just treat her as another part of nature and come and say hello.
Be interesting to do a little record, like in terms of what we survey now and look back on your notes. So Greenpeace and Wildlife Trust, and then the economic development, and then bringing them all together in terms of great offering and perspective and sustainability.
I mean, there's a missing piece in there that I guess I shouldn't skip, which is I went to work for Shell.
Is this confession time?
I mean, I went to work for Shell for a short time on their kind of their community-based sustainability. It was part of their community affairs stuff, and I was both incredibly naive and also a ridiculous optimist. I thought that somehow I might be able to influence a major oil company to change. And they did have a crisis, 2 crises in the year I was there. One was over a platform called the Brent Spar, which was occupied, and they were going to sink it. And, actually it looked like Greenpeace got the figures wrong, but the principle of just sinking this thing with oil in it was wrong. The second thing was much, much more serious, and it was only just on the radar when I went to work for them. But I remember asking a question about it, which was, so what is Shell doing in Nigeria? And that ended up as, being exposed in the end as the scandal it was. And the death of Ken Saro-Wiwa, which, really upset me so profoundly. I thought, I can't work for these, I've got to leave. And for a short while, there was an opportunity to try, because Shell was reeling, to try and influence change. And I naively wrote a paper about how they could stop being an oil company and become an energy company. And, well, sure enough, kind of 25 years later, they're all trying to do that in order to maybe greenwash themselves, but also there's some writing on the wall um, about carbon emissions. But I can't see Shell changing very rapidly.
Well, there's sort of a, yeah, it is interesting, isn't it? Sort of that to be in the change, you know, do you get change from outside or in it, or to understand, because that
Yeah.
is the you know, I remember, you know, part of common purpose is that everyone has a table, you know, place at the table.
Totally.
Mm,
I
mm,
absolutely solidly believe that.
yeah.
And Mac McCartney, who
Yes.
I find really
He
inspirational,
is.
that's Mac's position,
Mm,
that you don't create enemies and opposition out of people that you want to influence and bring around the table. You know, most of the guys working in those companies and women, their parents, their grandparents, they've got a sense of responsibility and future and values, and they have their own perspective, and not to hear them is not to live in the real world.
it isn't. And we benefit, you know. I drive my
Oh
car, you
yeah,
know, I think it's sort of,
yeah.
you know, so, and but it is interesting to see the energy companies now, and from that greenwashing, and you know, where can you how can you systemically change the culture, or what
Mm.
is it? It's not just a different label on the same thing, and
Yeah.
but how do you really create a different heart set and mindset
Mm.
in big corporations in that way? Mm.
Yeah, through lots of engagement, um, through being open for conversations, and I think, you know, the key to it is not having them and then uh, kind of rushing out press releases saying how crap they are. You know,
Mm.
that um, there is a need for a relationship building and more honesty in the dialogue
Mm.
rather than in the media.
Mm. Mm. Yeah. And I guess, how did it help you, you know, like having that profound experience, and particularly at that time with Shell,
Mm.
which is, you know,
Yeah, how did it help me? Mm.
yeah, how did it?
Yeah, that's a good question.
Mm,
I think um, I I licked my wounds for a while, and I felt a sense of shame for the attachment to them. Uh, Over time, I just you know, I understood that my motivations were good, even if there
mm,
was naivety there.
mm,
So I think that the biggest part for me was, you know, accepting that I could make mistakes with honourable intentions, and yeah, and learn and follow my heart a little bit more in terms of where I worked and who I
mm,
worked for.
mm, mm. Yeah.
Yeah, I'd followed my head with Shah. I thought, here's a sensible, smart career move that could have some influence, and you know, it was a wrong direction.
Hmm. Not a wrong, I guess, you know, in the end.
Mm.
Yeah, it's all part of it, isn't it?
Yeah,
In
yeah,
terms of
yeah.
part of the learning. Yeah, for
Mm.
sure. And so from there,
Yeah, from there, I got into. I had the best job ever. I went back to Lincolnshire where I was for a while, and it was like being given a suitcase of cash and told, yeah, just try and spend this somehow with a load of EU rules attached. And so I spent a couple of years uh, working on a program called Leader across Lincolnshire. 2.7 million quid. They said, here you go, do what you can,
yeah.
and it was fantastic fun. You know, working with a lot of creative and inspired people in local communities doing great projects, some of them
Wonderful.
environmental, some of them artistic, some of them economic. It was brilliant. Um,
Wonderful.
yeah, and then I went on into tourism and tourism development. Quite a lot of green tourism within it. I really enjoyed that side of it.
Mm, mm,
And then economic development, where I was involved in regeneration programs, and that's what in the end, through a change in life, had me move to Brighton, where you met me. And actually, I was
Yeah.
working in the economic development team at that time.
Oh, yes, you were. Yes. Yeah.
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 And that what I noticed there was we were the first among equals. Anybody working on the economy, we could have what we wanted, kind of thing. A massive budget and lots of staff. It was really interesting. And I suppose then my ideal job came up, which was the sustainability brief.
And what does that mean to you? Like, because it's interesting now, I'm following like intersectionalist environmentalism, where actually because sustainability has taken off in terms of such an environment focus or an economic focus, but hasn't got in terms of the social justice. But for me, sustainability is all three. But we've had to, I think, sometimes to get to the whole, you have to then focus on the part. So this, racial inequality and social justice is really important to then level the playing field. Where are you at with sustainability? And
I guess for me, there is an absolutely critical kind of environmental underpinning. We can't, things have got so bad in some areas, we can't make them worse. Things have to be turned around. So we don't do stuff that makes things worse. And we have an idea of where we are with that as individuals, as organizations, as nations. And then, there's a massive economic and social justice agenda that we do within environmental constraints. That's kind of how I see it. I work with a model through a long-term relationship, which I started when I was at Shell, with an outfit called Bioregional, and they've got a model called One Planet Living. I introduced that to Brighton. We became a one planet city. It was a kind of a badge, but it was more like a really detailed commitment to a different way of working. It's what I work with still. I think it's a great model. All the key components are in there, and it has a very simple principle that we don't carry on working as if there are and living as if there are 3.5 planets in Britain when there's one. You look to reduce that impact and address the other stuff that really matters too.
And where do you think, in terms of like the SDGs and where we are at, and at this particular time, I think actually there's so much work being done in sustainability over the years, but we've had, I think actually Greta Thunberg has, elevated the debate, and
she absolutely has. But and also I have a sense that the SDGs don't have the same level of anything like of public awareness as a whole, as a group, that the Millennium Goals did, around poverty in particular, and that I mean, rightly in some ways, the fixation is about climate change, but that there is a global catastrophe happening around us in relation to the natural environment as well. They have to be seen together. My sense is that the SDGs are quite low profile. They're a great tool. They're what we've got. We need to work with them. And I'd spent some time actually with Bioregional in New York, working with the voluntary organizations at their inception, trying to influence how things were set up. Met with a British delegation who at that time seemed really very positive. Now, it's gone a bit quiet.
Because I see them as sort of like tools. I probably don't need to go down this road so much, but both tools, but actually wonderful goals that we
Mm.
can galvanize and integrate around them, you know? So
Yeah.
it's a, yeah,
Completely. Yeah.
yeah. So I guess there was a, yeah, well, so I left you in Brighton. Yeah, sort of, yeah, I left Brighton and then sort of lost touch. And then, yeah, so what happened between, this is sort of, you had the wildness of Brighton, seeking
I
a
did,
wildness
yeah.
of
Well,
Brighton, and
yeah,
then
it
sort of
was
something
wild,
else.
you
Yeah.
know, and I had, yeah, some quite hedonistic years in Brighton. It was that kind of time, and then became a father, and you know, things changed, and and over time, I realised that you know I was in an intensely political environment with with a lot of pressure. I wasn't particularly handling it well, and you know, I didn't have the kind of wonderful natural environment around me so readily. You know, I lived in a treeless urban street with two smaller gardens. Yeah, the sea was there, but you know, it didn't have a lot of features to it either. There wasn't much relationship between Brighton and the sea. It was like a backdrop to a cultural city. Fantastic cultural offer. I tend to call it a box of sweets, Brighton. You know, there is so much, but you can quickly get sick. And you know, 10 years in the job was probably 5 years too long. And once, you know, it was the first Green administration, first Green-led council anywhere in Britain. And being a part of that really was super pressure and focus. And in the end, you know, I grew sick of the politics. I grew a bit sick of the place. And much as I love my friends and lots about Brighton, I needed to leave and go for a different kind of wild. And I just felt the real calling from West Cornwall.
That sounds like not a midlife crisis, but sort of, you know, where those points where they just, yeah, you have to, that's a real turning point. And it sounds like, I mean, you know, actually, to me, yeah, Brighton is a beautiful, you know, physically beautiful, and you've got the sea, but is it that you didn't have you didn't feel the connection with that, or you felt disconnected from yourself, or was it a
yeah,
crisis?
All of those at once, really. And there I was in one of the top environmental jobs, if you like, but barely stepping outside of an office. You know, constantly in meetings, constantly in front of the computer, and you know, I lost a part of me with it, and I definitely needed more deep nature connection for me, and yeah, I mean, and yeah, there was definitely a form of crisis in it. I was burnt out, and I needed a change, and it was great when it came, you know. And I spent a couple of years when I was down here, not you know, just recovering really, and volunteering every week out, yeah, doing conservation work, just another volunteer, and I loved it. It was fantastic.
Yeah, just getting your hands in the soil, or just really connecting. That, and it's interesting that you went intuitively to the land to heal or to rest, or that all this wildness that you wanted in Cornwall. And
well, it is wilder here. I mean, we get where I live, we get storms that are huge. My road is closed, you know, the waves are thundering in. There's water coming over the top of the great big church-like building next to us. My son and I, at the height of Storm Brian, it was called, at high tide, I said, hey, we've got to go out and see this. And we ran outside. We were next to the Coast Guard who'd marked off the road. And we stood there, and a wave hit the cliff, went up over, and just soaked us to the skin. And we screamed laughing and ran back in the house. my partner's looking at us in disbelief because we'd only just stepped out,
Just in a
and we were
moment.
wet to the skin, and
But feeling
howling,
alive.
yeah, feeling alive. That's right. Yeah, so
But I
I
love
needed some
it.
wild.
Yeah. But I think how many people in, particularly in sustainability or in, just generally big jobs, really serious jobs, but are so disconnected from the
Mm,
essence of what they want to save or to protect,
yeah,
that it becomes like, I think for so many of us, sustainability or climate change or is an intellectual exercise as opposed to the
yeah,
embodiment and really, really
absolutely.
living it.
And
Yeah.
there's a fantastic philosopher teacher, Satish Kumar, he's based in Devon,
Yes.
and I really remember vividly him saying something like, all you environmentalists, you need to just stop for a moment and go and spend some time out in the environment and stop worrying about it. And I really heard that. I really heard it. I'm disconnected. I don't know what, I'm not embodying it. And which is, and having learned from that is one of the reasons that Damien Toe, a great guy in Brighton, and I set up In Through the Outdoors, with this idea based on the great environmentalist John Muir, that going out is really what allows you to go in. And so specifically for sustainability professionals, and I run retreats, often with Damien, aimed at really reconnecting sustainability professionals, if you like, with time out, with nature in a deep way,
Right.
and allow them to really express where they are, what's going on, have a look inside, while taking them to the wilds of Snowdonia, or next month to the wilds of West Penwith, which is our own Celtic wildland down here.
Beautiful.
It's a very magical place,
Beautiful.
So I see it, having learned the lesson of burnout, disconnection. I now seek to support those who are doing incredibly important and stressful work by giving them an opportunity to stop, reflect, retreat, and reconnect.
And what have you seen in terms of the result of that, of people either
Mm. Well,
um,
the feedback I've had has been fantastic, but I say that not to blow my own trumpet
you
on it, but
can blow
just
your own trumpet.
yeah, sure. But I think no, what I hear from them is that they went a lot deeper than they expected. That the experiences in nature and some of the nature-based processes that I introduced gave them a profound sense of both the powerful symbolism of nature and that experience, and that they really needed that time to that restorative time out to reflect. And very often, in terms of, because classically I'll say, oh, what are you committing to, in the time ahead? Nearly all of them will say more time in nature, more time. And I talk about a couple of themes in particular. One is that nature's our greatest ally, and as a really simple premise, it works for clearing head, decision making. A walk is a huge thing in the right environment, and certainly I spent most of our lockdown tramping up and down the coastal paths here, just watching spring unfurling beautifully.
Yeah,
And
I
it
loved
did
your
so
post
much
on that
good.
actually.
Yeah,
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 it was a
yeah.
lovely observation and noticing of the
Mm,
unfolding spring. I'll see,
yeah.
put a link in
Oh,
there.
nice. Thank
Yeah.
you. And the other premise, it really is that uh, our first nature is our intuition. that our second nature is our default. It's what we always do. It's based on all our experiences and concepts and thoughts and feelings. And so we do the same old stuff. That's our second. But our first nature is our real gateway. When we're in innocence, like the child that I was talking about, like me as a child or you as a child, when we see things really fresh, we'll have the awe and amazement, and we can tap into, you know, what's really true for us, what's really in our heart. Mm-hmm.
And how do you do that? And you talk about the nature-based processes. What are some of the things that you've learned or experienced to access that?
Yeah, so I've done a lot of work with teacher, mentor William Whitecloud.
I love the book that you...
A Magician's Way. And there's The Last Shaman, which is really is magical.
It is.
And
it's super.
I spent some good time with William, really good time, learning about intuition, about innocence, about superconscious, and about really high level creative living. And, you know, and he based quite a lot of it in Africa. So I found myself going out there and having the most incredible experiences.
Wow. Whereabouts in Africa?
And that allowed me to learn and adapt some of those processes, some of those ways to my own programs.
Wonderful. Can you give us an example? Or just
I mean, I'll give you the one that's coming to mind is an incredibly simple idea, which is to pick 3 points in the landscape, 3 defined kind of point. It might be, you know, an angular tree, and then a cliff, and then, you know, a hedge or something, and from a place of innocence, not needing to work it out, not needing to know, doing what they call a land reading, which is trying to hold those 3 spots, which the brain almost can't do, holding 3 points at once, and then asking a question and seeing what comes. And you know, often I'll introduce this after we've been walking for half a day or for 2 days or whatever, and people will go off, find their own spot, and the question might be, what do I need to know right now, or how do I need to be in this next phase of my life? What will it serve me to see about myself? You know, so it's usually quite a profound question, and by being in a very open way and trying to hold these three points, they kind of scramble the brain in a way, and allow, it's as if they allow a gateway into something deeper, and the answer will come. And is the earth and nature providing the question or the answer? Well, it's no, all of that's going on up here, but that's providing the kind of gateway. Yeah.
Lovely. I when I started because I could Earth Converse, you know, how do we converse with the earth? So do you feel like you're conversing with the earth?
Yeah. I think for me, I find one of my rituals that I love doing is to go and converse with the sea every day or every other day, and just go, and I never know what I'm going to say before I'm there, and it's usually something of gratitude, and it always comes. So I find myself conversing with that and feeling so grateful to be here and to have the ocean right there. And you know, I previously I had a choice about immersing myself in the rhythms and gifts of the sea and the ocean, and there was yeah, a very profound feeling that that's what I was doing in those moments. And in the programs that I run, yeah, so we'll look at conflicts through buzzard or raven perspective. We'll do a medicine walk that has prompts from things in nature through the prompts of those momentous or landmark events in life, and by taking people to a place where they're really open to receiving, they'll see their life story unfolding, prompted by things in nature, and so they're being spoken to, if you like. And then very often I'll take them, you know, into a future medicine walk as well, where the things that they're going to love creating are presented to them as well.
And do you feel, you know, they come because they intuitively know that they're open to that, or do you feel that people actually through your inspiration and encouragement to engage with nature in that way, that they open up in the moment, or do they feel uncomfortable?
So yeah, almost as many different variations as there are in that question. Yes. So by and large, I don't give too much away about what people are going to experience. Yes. Because I think there's a magic in the not knowing. So very often some of this stuff takes them by surprise. And, you know, some things will really work profoundly for one person, like that land reading I talked about. A client of mine, it blew her mind. Someone else just didn't get it at all. How does that work? No, I can't do that. No, I'm not getting anything. But something will work, or some things will work for everyone. And as a whole, they always work. And I'll use a lot of poetry within the program as well. And next month, I'm employing the services of an astroarchaeologist.
Oh, that's super!
I can't quite believe I found her. But there she was on our website. She's called Carolyn Kennett. Mm-hmm. She's standing in the stone circle where I had the idea for the program.
Oh, really? It's a sign. Yeah. It's a sign.
Yeah, it was, of course, a sign. Yeah. And so it's very rich, very, very rich in West Penwith, in very in fantastic megalithic monument structures, stone circles, standing stones, and she's made it her job to really know them and how they line up at different times of the year and different key events.
I love that. And I love that, even that sort of the ancestral, the part of the connection, and and what it means to the individual being right there. Tell us more about the retreat.
So the retreat's in Through the Outdoors, September the 24th to the 27th.
Cool.
It's under the events section on my website, ThurstanCrockett.com.
Yeah.
And we've got the still COVID rules, which means that it's really intimate. There are 6 of us.
Perfect.
6 of us. And so it's largely outdoors. It'll be fires. It'll be some fantastic walks. So there's a day, half a day with Carolyn exploring some of those monuments, and the far western part. So near Land's End, Cape Cornwall, and some really amazing landscapes. And then there's some beautifully, some beautiful beaches and coves, and they're very close to the hills as well there. And then there's a half a day which will be exploring holy wells, and a kind of more magic landscape, a bit inland as well. Yeah.
Mm. Oh, I'm thinking of the poet, and I'm thinking of David Whyte's, Well of Grief,
Mm.
but how beautiful all those different environments will evoke different things in people.
Yeah.
That's a lovely
I
offering.
think that's one of the things that Damien and I have discovered over time, that there is a real magic in going to really different landscape
Yes,
types. And so
nice,
we'll have
Thurstan.
we tend to have a day, half a day on the beach, a day in the forest, a day in the mountains, and juggle those around depending on the weather,
Yeah, yeah.
and make them work. So I've followed that this time around. So it's not one dimensional. It's really,
Oh,
it's
that's
of
super.
all parts of that landscape.
And you're in the perfect, you've chosen literally the perfect place,
Yeah.
one of you to do that. And tell me just, because I want about this book, your beautiful writing. So
Mm.
when is it coming out? Incredible Encounters with Nature, revealing our true myth. Myths, yeah?
Myth. Yeah. So this came again from a course with William, Create Your Writer's Genius, and I discovered that the book that I'd always thought I wanted to write wasn't the book that was true for me to write, but that actually something really profoundly about um, our um, our connection to our disconnection from nature, and then about how life story can be really connected through extraordinary events, and particularly extraordinary encounters. And so I've had a series of these through my life, incredible encounters with wildlife, and it can be easy not to notice them, or for them to go on and just not be aware. And I had one last month, which was just fantastic. And they can just seem like great things, or they can take on a meaning. And what my argument is that depending on where we are in life, they can have profound meaning for us.
Absolutely.
And so that's the central premise of the book, really. That
Great.
as a collection, these mean a lot about the human condition and experience.
I'd love you to share with your, can you share one or two with your
Um,
encounters?
so the one of the ones that came to mind, which was when I was a kid, we had swifts. Do you know swifts? They're the fastest bird. They're sort of boomerang shaped. They scream over cities. They migrate over here. They're almost leaving now, Britain, back to Africa. Incredible. They're never off the wing. They even sleep on the wing. And they're extraordinary birds. And when I was a kid, I found one on the ground, and I knew immediately it shouldn't be on the ground. So I picked this bird up, and I could see, or I imagined I could see, kind of terror in its eye, but actually, it was just there, helpless. And then from under its wings, these I thought they were spiders came running out, big spiders, and my hand was covered in them. And there was a kind of horror about it, so I kind of flung them off. And then, I got to look after this bird. And of course, then I wanted to explore what were they, and how come they were so big, and what's the relationship between awe and revulsion that we inherit from different sources, and
great question.
Why do we judge some things revolting and others not? Anyway, I discovered these. They're a kind of louse, and they've evolved with the swift over millions of years, and they're so big that if I had them on me would be lobsters on me. I mean, they're big,
wow.
And somehow they've evolved together, and so it's completely normal for swifts to have these huge things, and the majesty of those swifts means that, you know, they just don't take a blind bit of notice. They don't even seem to do them any particular harm. So it was a way of exploring my relationship with revulsion and my sister's loathing of spiders and terror, how her daughters inherited that and her daughters inherited that, and also, you know, the incredible story of the swift and the majesty of them, and you know, as a child, how I saw all of those things together.
What a wonderful discovery and inquiry and honoring of that. Really. Actually, I was just talking to one of our last podcasts, Ray, and he talks about quite often we go out to nature for the beauty. But if we sit long enough or observe it long enough, there is the shadow side of that. And he actually even says that really that's really the fundamental reason why we go out to nature, to connect in that way.
Yes.
But this revulsion and awe is a spectrum of that. Oh, wow. Yeah. Any others you want to share?
Yeah, I mean, one of the most amazing ones for me was being driven off a hillside by a pair of ravens. You know, the raven is deep in kind of mythology in our culture as a kind of evil bird, or you know, which it's not, is it? I mean, you know, but a big, incredibly intelligent. Corvids are intelligent anyway, but ravens are said to be the most, you know. It was in Greece, well, it must be 20 years ago, and I got up really early because it was hot to walk later, and I walked up to the very top of a hill, and it was an amazing climb. And when I got right onto the top of the hill, and I could see panoramic view of the ocean, there's an island called Skiros, a beautiful island, and then I heard this sound, and I'd never heard a sound like it. It was like a kind of tuning fork, and it sounded metallic. And then I realized it was coming from a raven. But I've never heard anything like it before or since. Ravens make lots of weird noises. Sometimes they even sound a bit like ducks, and they honk, but this was something else again. And essentially what happened was the raven started coming towards me, walking, and another one came as well. And then they both started to clung, and they put the fear of God in me. You know, I wasn't welcome on their hillside, and they drove me off it, and you know, and I kind of turned and ran, you know, and it sort of sounds absurd, you know. Why wouldn't I have picked up some rocks and thrown them, or made a big noise, or made myself big? Well, partly I wasn't in that frame of mind, so there was something about my vulnerability that they may have sensed. But actually, the more profound message for me was just this: that if not just birds, but if animals could communicate to us about where we're not welcome, where else would we not go?
Yes.
Yeah. How much more would we need to listen?
Well, that's the thing. Maybe they are communicating, aren't they?
Exactly.
And you are. They are.
I was absolutely clear that they were communicating to me.
Yeah.
And that actually, you know, I wasn't welcome, and I didn't need to prove anything by hanging around. You know, I needed to prove more to myself by getting out of the territory.
Yeah, and you're really respecting that. You're literally tuning into that.
Yeah.
Beautiful, beautiful, Thurstan. And I think, you know, going back to your point, you know, you can miss these encounters or see them as meaningless, or just even ignore, but they are profound. That is the symbolic life, isn't it?
Yeah.
That if we really can turn up in that way and really pay attention. There's so many gifts, and noticing what projecting or what we're carrying and
all of that. I mean, it's really all of that. So there's probably about 20 more of these stories, and they're all powerful individual experiences.
Great. We wait for the book. So when's the book out?
I'll commit to next year.
Go on. Sign me up. But this is lovely. So what so for your own self, so to what extent, I suppose from the teenager 20-year-old or into the Greenpeace and Wildlife Trust and the sort of the activism and then the policy and then maybe the corporate and then going to sustainability and then burning out at that point and then going into sort of more nature-based and reconnecting with that and then the retreats and coaching. So what have you learned? How has your sustainability changed from this more deeper nature connecting with the environment? How has that changed, and how have you changed?
Well, how I've changed is that I think I acknowledge, I just got really clear about the value of different people with different roles within the whole environmental sector. So, when my son Tom went off to join Extinction Rebellion protest march in Truro, which is our nearest city. I helped him get there. I walked alongside him for a while. He didn't want me hanging about, but I just wanted to show him that I absolutely supported him. And he was to take the day off school and get out there. And the inspiration of Greta Thunberg was immense for my generation as much as for his.
Yes.
But no, actually, maybe even more so for his. And so, I'm not necessarily the kind of guy who'll go out on a protest march anymore. I might. But I am lobbying my MP and having Zoom calls with him about aspects of policy. And I am working with the people who are in Apple or running logistics organizations or renewable energy bodies and being both a coach in some cases and a provider of a retreat space and experience where they can kind of regroup through a deep connection. So I see myself as a bit of an elder, not yet an old man, but an elder with quite a lot of life experience who can support those younger in particular.
Absolutely.
As part of a wide panoply of stuff. And I love to champion the people who I think are hugely influential and there's such a wealth of fantastic nature writing. There's been a real renaissance in the UK in particular, but wider as well for nature writing. It's a wonderful time to be writing and be in that company, I hope.
Yes. Who are you reading at the moment?
Well, I'm reading Isabella Tree at the moment. Her book Wilding is huge, absolutely massive. There's a young Northern Irish man called Dara McNulty. He's a young man. He's written an incredible book about his experience with nature and like a number at the moment on the theme of how important it is to his good mental health. As a young man with autism, he is really so beautifully expresses how important it is to him. And Chris Packham before him as well. But I've usually got 3 or 4 books on the go. But they're they're the ones that come to mind right now.
Yeah, lovely.
And George Monbiot, of course.
Yes, yeah,
You
for
know,
sure. Yeah,
yeah.
yeah, wonderful. And in terms of your as a as a human being, as an elder, as a man, as a how have you're connecting and back, and how has that changed you, or is it going back to your essence of
Mm.
you know
I think,
intuitive self,
mm, yeah,
reconnecting with yourself, or
yeah. So that's a good question. I think what I realize is that, as as the son of a Victorian, I grew up with a very conventional mindset that was very much science based. Uh, really valued logic, scientific discovery. Spirituality was anathema. And so I've spent certainly the last 5 years accepting that there is greater magic out there than I imagined, that we are connected to all things through time and space, and that there are extraordinary things out there that it would do me good to be open to. So I'm unlearning a lot of ways of thinking and being, and kind of relearning a bit more innocence and openness.
That's lovely, and lovely role modeling to encourage
Mhm.
others to do that.
Yeah, I think that's really important, particularly, for me, particularly young men. Um,
Yes.
but also you know, I've got a couple of older women clients at the moment, and I think for them, rediscovering some of the passion of their heart from younger days is really
Yes.
important too.
Yes, and I think there's sort of for me the unpeeling of actually what do I believe in?
Mm,
Is it my parents, or to shed some of the what is it, the crocodile scales or whatever,
mm,
to see what is the essence of myself, and
yeah.
and what it is to be a woman, and stepping into that eldership as myself, and
Mm.
a crone, reclaiming the word crone
Oh my,
or
oh
witch.
word, yeah, which
you
is
know
great. Yeah.
where they used to be positive terms, and this
Mm,
is somewhere along the line, like spinster, it got as
yeah.
an insult, and sort of what does that mean, and
Mhm.
what can we offer, and yeah. Well, I'd love to, continue, but will we put a pause for now?
That's good.
Yeah,
It's been
yeah.
great. Thank
It's
you.
been so lovely, and it just so lovely to see your smiley face. The videos, not as clear as what it could be, but I think that's the essence
Mm.
of you just shines out, and
Thank you, Penny.
really. And good luck with your retreat. And that sounds
Thank you
super.
very
Yeah.
much.
And have you got some more for the next year, or is it too early with
Well,
COVID?
there's a lot of uncertainty, but
Yeah.
yes, the answer is yes. We're looking to go to Dartmoor. We're looking to
Yeah.
go to the French Alps. We're looking to
Good.
go to the Highlands of Scotland
Mm.
and back to Snowdonia. So with Damien, we shall do some great things.
Oh, I might come to the Highlands with you. I've been watching Outlander.
Oh, fantastic! Yeah, we got to come.
And it's my Scottish roots, actually.
Oh
My
yeah.
grandfather comes from Forest. It would be a lovely thing to explore and do
Oh,
a
you're
lovely
on.
work with
I'll make
you.
sure you
Go
know
on
me
then.
well.
All
Yeah.
right. So we'll just pause here and see you back for the next Earth Converse podcast. In the meantime, go out and enjoy nature, one conversation at a time.